I'm Tim Kitzrow. This is not NBA Jam. This is a paid-for production for Big Rye and the Fat Guy. Kaboom!
It was unreasonable. What's up, YouTube? It's Big Ryan, the Fat Guy, coming at you with the NFL picks against the spread for Week 4 of the 23-24 NFL season. Fat Guy, we are one game under 500, but who cares? On to the Week 4 Thursday Night Football game between the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers. Packers opened as 2-point dogs. Lines moved in their favor here from 2 to 1, but the juice is still on the line. So really, this isn't much of a move at all come from opening to the current line. Fat Guy, your thoughts?
Well, this is one of those situations where maybe it's just getting the number right. You know what I mean? There's depending on how far you go back here, there's times where it's been a pick too. So I'm sure maybe this has it has to have something to do with injuries, but it's always like this isn't going to be one like Christian Watson's playing. I don't have the information in front of me, but I can't imagine that might move the line. Forget points on the money line, like 2 cents maybe. And I know that sounds crazy, but think of the times we're in. Everything's kind of well reflected in the market. Like Derrick Henry, if you were to trade him, some friends where I were talking in a different group, what is he really worth? A third and a fifth? I know people be disgusted by that comment, but that's just the reality of things too. When you take into consideration, I mean, oh, this is aside, but contract and stuff like that. So think about their touch on the game isn't much. So in reality, it's pass rusher, key offensive linemen, cluster injuries. If you lose a whole offensive line, things just go get really messy, let's call it, and quarterback. But aside from that, it's not going to move it too much. So a lot of this jockeying between all the lines might just be about getting the book lined up on the numbers it wants to. So at different juice evaluations. As far as picks go, we're going to be taking the Lions, and it's just purely a contest pick. But a lot of the shuffling you see in between the bands of 2.5, -2.5, 2.5, that's not a really good indication. If you take a look at the money line, is where you want to see fluctuations. And in reality, it opened at Detroit, currently is Detroit -121. It opened at -131 on Pinnacle. 10-cent move. I mean, it's 10 cents is more valuable the shorter you go when you look at implied probability. So, combined, there's what, a -121 plus 108. So what do we got here? 239 points of juice. So yeah, 10 cents is more of a move than if it were, say, a -400 and a plus 325, but it's still not enormous. And this more has perhaps ill-conceived opening, not even ill-conceived, slightly off opening than it would be from an injury recovery, in my opinion. But again, I would like to see the announcement versus the movement of Christian Watson, because that would give you a really is it Watson? I always get it. Garrett Wilson, Christian Watson. Yes, it is. That'll give you a good idea of what a WR1 is worth. Not that he's the best, but you understand where I'm going with that.
And this is going to be a 5-star entertainment game between the Lions and Packers at Lambeau. Fat Guy, on to the early game. I'm guessing in London. It's somewhere overseas. The Atlanta Falcons traveling traveling to the UK to take on the Jaguars, who opened as 3-point favorites at -106, currently -3 at -113. This is kind of off topic, but is there home field advantage for the Jags in the UK?
See, now that's where you're starting to think about angles, right? Where we bring up stuff where maybe this could be departed from the norm. I mean, Jacksonville has done historically well off the top of my head. They had some big underdog wins, I believe, against both Pittsburgh and Baltimore. I think they beat Baltimore really bad, if memory does serve me correct, which obviously Baltimore doesn't get routed that often. And of course, those are different Jacksonville teams, but perhaps it's not the players necessarily, but perhaps the logistics of travel. I mean, maybe it's easier, maybe they're better at it. Maybe they're better. The complementary staff is better at adjusting for a team. That's all possible. I don't have any empirical data to reflect on. And it opened at -163 on, I'm looking at the consensus line. Let's take a quick look at Pinnacle. It's currently minus 170, opened at minus 177. 7 cents at that valuation is probably like 0.2% or something like that. So really not that big of a shift. But if you were to be ascertaining an edge, is perhaps the home field advantage could be undervalued for Jacksonville. Like that might be an idea. So that's a really nice idea from Big Rye. That might be something to look at. It might, how teams travel in London. I mean, how you could really do it is understand how teams travel historically and then understand that impact when you add in, X amount of time zones. I bet you could find an angle. I don't know if you'd overcome the juice, but that's like one of the weird ideas. Because think about it this way: if you figured it out now and it was beating the market, I can't imagine they're not going to add more games. And imagine if you had an edge, not just maybe on the money line, but there's other derivative markets that you see an outlier in, perhaps first quarter, or maybe that doesn't make any sense. Perhaps maybe there's a prop thing to consider that I'm missing, something like that. There's, I almost gave away a big one that I have. But anyways, that's an angle to look for. We're just going to take Jacksonville and we're going to move on. But interesting thoughts from Big Rye.
That guy next up, the Denver Broncos travel to Chicago to take on the Bears. Bears open as 2.5-point dogs, currently 3-point dogs, and the juices move quite a bit too, with Denver being -3 at -118. Your thoughts on this game?
Something that was interesting to me. A friend of mine messaged me because there was like a Reddit post or something of that nature. Like, how could the Broncos be favored in this game despite losing by 50 points? And there's something to learn from that. And what it is like that's one game. Yeah, they got crushed, but when you distribute the games, sure, you could take some salt from that game, right? But that doesn't mean that they're worse than the Bears. I think it's fair to say the Bears are the worst team in the league, Big Rye.
They're down at the bottom. Let's put it that way.
Let's just put it that way.
Denver's, edging towards the bottom as well.
Correct.
But it's, there's 32 different teams, 30 teams, whatever it is, and the
32.
How every like you say, there's a million iterations of what can happen every game. It was a very, very bad, possibly one of the worst iterations for the Denver Broncos in that game, but they're still a professional team. They have professional players. The Bears aren't very good. This could be anywhere from 3 on either side. I don't think I'd bat an eye or probably bet either side, to be honest.
Probably not. I mean, I think there's even a chance that there could be value on a team like the Broncos. This is another thing that's kind of strange iteration. We're going to be taking them in the contest here. It did open look ahead from I'm looking at a consensus line though, because Pinnacle's off the board right now. -110, +110. There's no juice on the consensus line in favor of the Broncos, and currently the consensus line is -155, +155. And it's probably about right. It's kind of disappointing for the Broncos season so far, but the point is that you can have a really bad game and it doesn't just make you a zero. It's just not how that works. Conversely, we're going to see on the other end that Miami is an underdog, and rightfully so. So we're just going to be a contest pick, but that's something. Point of intrigue is in these extreme moments of a change in priors. Prior meaning this really bad loss by Denver. Is there an overestimation or underestimation of the market? Is that an angle? Perhaps it would be better if they played a team that had a run good, whereas Chicago's pretty much underperformed from median expectation every game. So it would have been better if they played a team who's overperforming, perhaps. Tough one. Maybe you could even
they could
Arizona.
Play the Cowboys, not even Arizona,
not
any of the top teams. There's going to be
lost. It's got to be someone that's sorry, we'll jump to it real quick here. If they played
the Bills, the Chiefs, the Eagles,
yeah,
even the Cowboys, even after that loss, it's still it's still going to be that the Broncos are way worse, which
Right,
in the public
right,
size is true. This is interesting to me because looking at, I've been doing some work on opening lines. The opening line for this game was actually one of the biggest discrepancies, which would have been Bears by -1.5, which is interesting. So you can think of this as maybe home field isn't as important. Maybe there's been more injuries on the Bears than I realize at the top of this, but it's actually a surprising line, and I think that's why we've taken Denver, even though neither of us are probably going to be betting this game. But from a pick perspective, it's one of those things where if the line seems that far off, especially on a team where the prior has been so bad for the Broncos, there probably is some value on picking the Broncos.
There might be. I do want to do a quick aside here too. I probably will bet a derivative of the game. I'm not going to bet the main line. There's stuff in the comment section that I saw, but I never had I never responded to. But I'm going to do it on here. I guess is probably the best way rather than a quick little write up. There's a lot of questions about should I pick X, Y, or Z. Well, when you should choose something there's two ways really of doing it. If you're doing it for recreation, you should just choose what gives you the least amount of regret. Because if you're doing recreation, you're gonna take a bad price anyways. You shouldn't really bet. But if it doesn't cost you much money and you get entertainment utility out of it, and you can afford it, have at her. Just have the expectation of losing. The last thing is though, if you're trying to make a go out of it, the question isn't who's going to cover what. Do I like this team? It's none of those questions. The question is all about price is right. Be Bob Barker. Is this good value for the price? And how you can do that is you can look at a strong sports book like Pinnacle, and is the price you're getting beating that by a significant margin? Now you want to beat Pinnacle's no vig line. So then you have to question yourself, how do I remove the vigorish, And there's plenty of ways to do that. I'm not going to disclose how I do that because I spent way too much time on something. And by the way, that's a trivial thing too, trying to figure that out to the most efficient of methods. It took me a whole summer to just test out different ways of doing it. And, until I settled on something that I do like. And that's just step one. So whenever you're betting, it's be the price is right. Am I the person that's going to get called up for the showcase? That's it. That's all that matters. Not whether I think so-and-so is going to win. Am I getting a good price? That's the be all end all. And by the way, one more thing, you'll get more satisfaction out of it if you play that game with the money line because your return will be higher when you win or less. So like shopping for prices will be realized more and will kind of give you more of a benefit. Whereas like if you shop points and you get an extra half point here and there, that'll only get realized a couple times throughout the season. And even though it'll probably equal out to the same, I don't have that in front of me. It's kind of like demoralizing because you're doing this work and you made the same return as someone that bet it at a worse point evaluation because say you got it at -4.5, someone gets it -6, they win by 7, you both win. Well, how about this? Pick the money line, start at the most basic of betting instruments and work your way up from there and see if you can get a good price. Be Bob Barker.
That's a great point by Fat Guy. On to the next one. Baltimore at Cleveland. Cleveland open 2.5, -110. Still -2.5 at -115. Is there any value in this market?
The look ahead line, had Baltimore as a favorite, and it shifted to Cleveland. I can't speak to the injuries, despite being I guess a fan. I don't really watch as much as I'd like to. I'm behind the computer too often. But there has been shifts from the look ahead to the current, like -116 Baltimore to -136 on the consensus. Let me just take a quick look at Pinnacle because Pinnacle doesn't really have look aheads. That's another reason Pinnacle is like they don't take many risks in that vein, but that's because they take high limits and they don't take in losers, so they don't take chances on those early limits. So on those early betting. So it opened at -144 and is currently -145. So there's an angle. We just found one. If it was if you could get the Browns at +116 and they're currently offered at -145, that's value all day, all night. So obviously that's going to have some injury stuff to do with it, which obviously we can't touch on because I don't know it all. But think about look ahead lines. If you do want to bet the NFL, betting at close is almost impossible to beat the juice because they are almost always within that band. However, though, if you were to look ahead and kind of think of factors into what would shift lines and what a good price would be, I do know somebody that does it, not professionally or anything, but he does track diligently now. And his goal is to beat the closing line. He's trying to get a better price than is offered at the most efficient time, which is at close. So that might be a way to do it, is some of these look ahead lines, and think about what might go into that. Is there perhaps an injury that could happen? So a team that has two very similar caliber quarterbacks would be less elastic to price fluctuation from an injury, whereas a team that has a very strong quarterback versus an average backup, that gap in injury would favor a team with similar complements at quarterback. For instance, could there be a weather event that would favor one team over another, a team that's, say, more run defense oriented versus a passing team, that you could foresee on the calendar that maybe isn't baked in the line? These are all ideas. I'm just giving you ideas. I don't play these angles. I have my own, but I'm giving you ideas of what to do. And this is another example of it. Also, too, the game that could happen, maybe there's a team that's a huge underdog, and there's a good chance that they get pumped, and that prior would affect their line after said game. So perhaps you could get a good price early because it's not the reaction to that game might be overestimated, for instance. Anyways, these are just ideas. All of that being said, we're going to take the Cleveland Browns and move on.
Fat Guy, next up, the Bengals at the Titans. Titans opened as 2.5-point dogs at -106. The line hasn't moved since open, or at least is back to where it opened at. Your thoughts on this game?
Not much to say here. No movements. Opened on the 26th at 6:35 a.m. in the a.m. Pacific time on Pinnacle. Currently at -139. So -139, 124. It peaked at -141. Purely a contest pick, Cincinnati Bengals.
Next up, Miami Dolphins at the Buffalo Bills, a game I'm sure a lot of people are interested in. 5-star entertainment.
Probably, yeah.
Bills opened at 2.5. The line has moved for them from -106 up to -120. So pretty much at that, 3 at even for the Bills, and right now -2.5 at -120. Essentially the same thing.
Yeah, and like point in case, look, we're talking about it. Opened on the 24th at 5 p.m. on Pinnacle Pacific time. -140 on the money line. I'm using money line so I can get more of an obvious representation of where the movements are, because the movements are generally incongruent. Congruency, I don't think that's a word. In concert with the point spread. So it's moved 9 cents in their favor. So maybe the prior isn't as strong, or maybe it opened too low. Maybe just the opening was too low. I think it's just a game for purely entertainment's sake. This is going to be a Buffalo pick for me, but perhaps an angle would be, are the Dolphins overestimated? And it certainly didn't open that way, that's for sure. So it's actually moved against them. So kind of interesting market move, even though it's such an insignificant move. It's just you expect more reaction. Perhaps perhaps amateur bettors bet closer to the closing line, but I doubt that'll be an effect. I'm kind of curious, though, now that I say that, it wasn't that, I didn't have a good angle on this, but now it's kind of curious if there's like really tense price movement, like, a bunch of square money moves. I hate those. We used to do it too. I used to believe in it. I don't anymore, but like, I'm curious, like, does each cent get bought back instantly? Like, I'm kind of curious, like, if this is equilibrium, and like, will the battle for like what the true price is it gonna wage on
continually move the needle, essentially, is what you're trying to say. I think it's very interesting that the priors from this Broncos Dolphins game have had kind of the opposite effect of what you'd expect, but that could have just been because the line that was set was maybe overreacted on, compared to what the public thought. Yes. But still very early. There's still lots of bets to come in, so it might come back to even, knowing that a more public type better, the average better probably hasn't bet yet. They're probably waiting till till Sunday, and that could move the line possibly a bit more.
Maybe
We're
It's hard
just
to make those
theorizing
judgments.
now.
Yeah.
We're off topic. The Bills is our pick for this game. Next up, Washington Football Commanders at the Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles opened 8.5 as 8.5 point favorites, minus 106, currently plus 101. So the juice at least has moved for the Commanders. Fat guy, I know you were talking about let's just have a side note on the Eagles and the Eagles coaching staff and Eagles decision making compared to a lot of the other teams in the NFL.
Well, that's a thing. Like I don't tend to take that stuff too serious because I don't like my inputs to be opinion based, but something has to be said here for, I do believe that keeping the opposing defense on the field has a variety of benefits where it makes your win probability a little bit high, like a lot higher. Every defense is bad. It's a tired defense. I don't like using cliches, but that's my own, and I do believe it. So the Eagles just know how to extend drives because they do the obvious things and they do them very well. Like, I don't know what their conversion rate is on 4th and short, but it's got to be close to immaculate. And I don't know why other teams
mentioned on the broadcast that I think they were 29 for 32 or 29 for 31 on that play specifically. And some of those might have been, 4th and 2s type of things. I don't know.
That's true too. That's true too. We don't know what the parameters are. So my thing about someone like the Eagles is I think that they're decoupled from, I might have said this in the last couple of podcasts, but I'll keep hammering it home. It's probably worth looking into. I think they're decoupled from the point spread because they don't try and run up scores. They try and win games. So a good example of that was Minnesota is, even though they gave up a big play to Mario Addison, I don't know, was that week 1? Can't recall, but they ran the ball 60 times. But they ran it effectively. They were just running into a brick wall, and they took so much time off the clock. It'd be very hard to lose that game because think about it, all your drives were lasting 9 minutes, and all you had to do was not give up quick scores, even though they managed to do it, and they still won. So I'm not sure how I feel about the Eagles against the spread, but I do like them on the money line, and I think they should be favored against any team on any field. That is my belief. So there's a chance that I would bet them as a dog. Say if they were on the road in, I guess it'd have to be San Francisco or Kansas City. That'd be the only contenders. Perhaps Buffalo, but I don't even think so then. Regardless, we're going to find out. They do play Kansas City, but I'm not sure if it's home or away. In any event, we're going to take Washington against the spread, but this is an example of where I don't think the spread reflects the money line. I don't think those implied probabilities line up.
That guy next up. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers travel to New Orleans to take on the Saints, who opened as 3-point favorites, still 3-point favorites. Juice has only moved a couple points. Anything about this market that stands out to you?
No, open at minus 170 is currently minus 176, just a few cent move. There was some rumblings about Derek Carr, but obviously that's not reflected in the line movement. So this will just be a chalk pick, New Orleans Saints.
Next up, Minnesota Vikings at the Carolina Panthers. Panthers opened as 3-point dogs, moved up to 3.5-point dogs. I have a feeling this is because of quarterback news. I think Andy Dalton is most likely going to start for the Carolina Panthers. But is that an overreaction? Do you think that the injury to the rookie quarterback for the Panthers really changes it that much to switch to Dalton?
It went against him. It moved 10 cents in their favor when he was announced that he wasn't playing
Interesting.
last week. Yeah, it did. I didn't see how it closed, but during that brief moment, some people preferred the Carolina Panthers. Maybe that wasn't money line. Maybe that was in the spread. Because see, there's another thing too. Andy Dalton might cover you more games. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Whereas a rookie quarterback might give you a dichotomy of results. Some more wins than Andy Dalton, but way more disastrous losses. So that's another way to think about things in that, everything's coupled together relatively closely. You might be able to find some deviations because the distributions of performances among players of those styles are much, much different. Kind of like Jameis Winston, especially Jameis Winston Bucks. I feel like that's a stronger, during that era, it was probably better to take the other team and lay like even a touchdown extra or 6.5 points. Whereas the money line, when you're slinging it that much, all you need is a couple bounces in your favor, which might not be reflected in the current price, right? So I'm trying to give you the best example of what that would be, and I think Jameis Winston does encompass that. That being said, when I say chalk pick, what I really mean is chalk angle in terms of the last one. This one is similar in that case, but it is interesting to have an idea in terms of whether Andy Dalton is better for the spread or Bryce Young. I get CJ Stroud and Bryce Young mixed up every time, and I got it right this time, but I'm sure I won't next time. So that being said, we're just going to take Minnesota and lay the points.
Back guy. Next up, the LA Rams travel to Indy to take on the Colts. It's been a 1-point spread as far as the lines go. Juice has moved, though, from -101 for Indy up to -114 currently. So the juice has moved, but really this is kind of in just no man's land. Not much has changed, really.
Yeah, but the money line, though, is a little bit more of win probability affected. It's moved 14 cents. Open at -108. It's currently -122. So that's like, I know 14 cents doesn't seem like a lot, but these are about as close a money line as you can evaluate. So I would say that does have a little bit of significance in there. And just to put it in perspective terms, I have it right here. You just allow me one moment. So if it went from -108 to, let's just call it true implied probability, to -122, that's a gap of 3%. So that's a little bit more significant on the money line. I get that it's not reflected in the points, probably because it would be too hard of a shift to move within, to hit the threes, right? So, but that might tell you something too. The value of a point is probably a little bit more strong in this game, particularly because I don't have the total in front of me. I'm going to pull it up right now. It's 46.5. It's higher than I would have thought. But generally, the points matter a bit more, even especially between the threes. Not especially, but more in the threes than usual if the total is lower. I'm surprised that this total is that way. It seems a little bit strange here now that I look at it, because that's a more of a significant shift in the money line considering what's reflected in the point spread. So something to think about, something to look into. The pick is going to be Indianapolis.
Next up, we have Pittsburgh at Houston. Steelers opened as 3-point favorites on the road. Still 3-point favorites, but the juice has moved down a bit. Opened at -115, currently at -108. Anything stand out to you about this market?
Yeah, we'll open at -179 in the money line on Pinnacle, and currently -159. Curious what created that shift. A little bit of intrigue there. Houston perhaps overperforming a little bit. Did that defy the opening? Like, are the priors for Pittsburgh Houston on Pinnacle when they opened it? Because sometimes I listened to a podcast. One of my favorite stories was one of the directors. They opened the first NBA game. I believe it was Heat Boston, like 6 or 7 years ago. They opened Boston -2, and whereas everyone else had 3, and they wrote an article about how Pinnacle was right about the number. In reality, they're just putting a number out, like, just cause. You know what I mean? They're taking low limits when they open anyways, right? So they're just creating like a market stimulus, right? So you can also think about, like, why is that number like that? And if they're doing that, if they're doing it haphazardly, you might be able to grab some EV right when that number comes out. So this number moved from -179 to currently -159. I don't think that's injury related, if I do recall, because I can't recall any Pittsburgh Houston news. So don't hold my feet to the flames on that. But that might just be a case of Houston being perhaps underestimated from the get-go from using old priors. So anyways, point in case, we're just going to take Pittsburgh, and off we go.
That guy. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders travel to LA to take on the Chargers, who opened as 6-point favorites. Still 6-point favorites. Your thoughts on this market?
It's kind of strange. It's open at -258, and currently it's -257. A friend of mine messaged me that there's a chance Brian Hoyer plays. I didn't read or hear anything about that, but I'm not as diligent on the news anymore. Believe it or not, I actually have bots of my own that do message me when significant news changes. See what I mean? See how far you have to go with this? and it's an in-house spot. I got someone to make it for me, and I used it all NBA season last season. I don't even like NBA. Anyways, that being said, so that makes me think that that's not really true or credible. But minus 258 and minus 257. I'm curious. This would be a really good one since we have like a benchmark now of Jimmy Garoppolo probably playing. We'll just call it minus 257, minus 218. So we'll call it plus 232 consensus or minus 232 for LAC consensus. Let's see what the consensus would be if indeed Brian Hoyer is in, because it would be kind of a surprise. So that would give you a good example of the difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and what we'll call a average, slightly below average career backup. So it'll give you a good idea of shift and win probability that would create and give you a good idea for benchmarks going forward. I think that's the intrigue of this game, assuming that is at all a possibility. That being said, we're just going to take the Vegas Raiders, and obviously we would prefer Jimmy Garoppolo to play if we do select him in the contest.
My prediction, if that does happen and Hoyer starts, is that the Chargers open, our Chargers line would be minus 9.5. That's my prediction. Okay. Next up, Arizona Cardinals at the San Francisco 49ers. Niners opened as 14-point favorites, minus 103. That's what they are currently at. This is another game where priors could have possibly affected this line. Really, we're not going to see a huge amount. Like, do you think this would have been 14.5 if Arizona lost?
I don't know. The Arizona's like done surprisingly well. It's kind of tough to say. The money line opened at minus 851 on Pinnacle and is currently at minus 845. The what's difficult to ascertain and stuff like this is points become less significant as you scale up the money line. So you can see a lot more elasticity in how the books adjust, right? So I mean, 14 is a key number, but it's still not a 10. It's definitely not a 7 or a 6 or an 8 for that matter. And 3, forget it, right? Like I bet you probably 11 to like 16 probably has the same amount of difference as 2.5 to 3.5 in a low total game. Like I can't imagine it's that much different, even though that sounds really crazy, right? But that is one way to look at it. So when you see that shift and say you're going to like, oh, I can get a free point here, you're probably not beating the juice, to be fair, in a lot of instances. So especially if you're at one of those rec books that charges like minus 114. And I'm dealing with a lot more of those these days because I tend to pick ones that have like slot, they're slot focused, and then they sublet out a portion of their website for sports betting. Those have a lot of slow lines, so I've been attacking those for the last few months. You get limited really quickly, but to give you an example, though, they're often off a point, but they can override that. We'll call it market inefficiency with charging a higher juice because some of them have like minus 118s aside, which is putrid. However, though, they're slow to the draw on so many things that like you can still beat it, which also makes you fly under the radar for a moment or two. But anyways, long story short, there is more elasticity in adjustments when the points get up higher. That being said, we're going to take Arizona, a nice popcorn game.
In a sample size of 838 games, 14 points has finished the same amount as 8. So 14 might be more key.
Interesting.
More key than you realize, fat guy. New England Patriots.
Interesting.
At the Dallas Cowboys. Cowboys opened at 7-point favorites. Still 7-point favorites, but the juice has moved heavily for the Pats from minus 106, currently at minus 119. So this might push down to a 6.5 at Dallas minus 110 type of line. That's pretty much what it's at right now.
This is kind of interesting because Dallas only shifted from minus 320 to minus 305 on the money line. So I think we're getting into like fun territory with sports because I keep talking about decoupling. It's kind of been the, theme for the show. And I don't like that doesn't feel in line with this spread. Like,
the one thing I will say before you go on is that there are times where the spread comes out at a different time than the money line. So it's not always the greatest to look at opening spreads and compare them to opening
Right.
money lines because there can be a difference. It's better to compare current spreads and current money lines to see. But if you're smart, there's places on the internet where you can find timestamps so you can compare the two to see what they are. But Fat Guy is bringing up.
I'll throw a plug here. BetStamp is the best free one. I have 3 odds screens. I don't like. There's something I don't like about all of them. There's something I like about all of them. BetStamp is probably the best value considering it's free. Because like the one I'm using right now is $1,380 Canadian a year, and I don't want to plug it because I'm not super impressed with all of it. There's one thing I use though all the time on it, which like this is the fun part though. I could do the math myself, but I'm too lazy. And then, because it'll probably take me 60, 70 man hours. Is that worth paying $1,380 a year? You get in this whole economical debate, and that's a really good point from Big Rye. But I do think though that this might be a situation where perhaps Dallas is more likely to cover New England's more likely to cover than actually win. So, but he is right that they do come out at different times. So maybe I should clarify that going forward.
No, I think there's nothing wrong with it. Most of the time, it's pretty close.
Pretty close. It's within an hour a lot of the time.
But that hour could be the difference between this. So it could be one of those things. So just in your own research, if you are following along and doing this stuff at home, just make sure you know when the timestamps were when you're comparing spreads to money lines.
That stamp line history. I don't mind a plug. Don't mind it at all.
And who are we picking in this game? Pats or Cowboys?
Hey, that being said, maybe value on the spread. Pats minus 119 on a no juice spread. Give me the 7. Give me the Pats.
And then on to the Sunday night game, Kansas City at the New York Jets. I still have numbers for if Aaron Rodgers was going to play. This would have been about a Kansas City -1 type of game, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, man. Intrigue. I don't agree with that, but very intrigued.
Yeah, Kansas City -1.5 would have been roughly the line if Rodgers was playing. He is not playing, and we can see the theoretical difference between Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers here is 9.5 points from that 1.5 up to Kansas City -10. We see this open. It opened at 10. The juices moved in favor of the Chiefs. Is this another one of those games where maybe the win ratio versus the spread win ratio? I'm not making any sense, but should you bet the spread more likely or a money line in this game?
Probability between the spread and the money line.
Much more eloquent.
I'm not a succinct guy either. I'm long-winded, which is it's not the soul of wit at all, actually. They moved 37 cents on the money line. They opened at 5:13 p.m. on the 24th, whereas the spread on Pinnacle opened at 5:13 on the 24th. So
this is perfect. This is great. This is a good
direct
one.
Lineup. So the 32 cents in this game, that's the from 32 cents from -400 to -432 on Pinnacle is worth just under 1 point between 9.5 and 10.5. There's something. Do what you like with that information. That being said, I think the Jets are more likely to cover, but not enough to bet on it ever. We'll be taking the Jets and the points.
And then on to the singular Monday Night Football game, which I am going to appreciate. I did not like the doubleheader Monday night personally, but this is I'm going to throw it out there. This could be a 5-star entertainment game between the Seattle Seahawks, the New York Giants. It opened Giants +2 at -105. They've been bet up to -1, -110 right now. Fat Guy, all right, what's going on here? What's happening in this game?
Hey, what is happening? You sound like the Office Space guy, Bob Cole's character. Bill Lumberg. Anyways, that is somewhat of a shift. Let's just see, for timestamp's sake, to satisfy the Big Rye point is 5:14 on the 24th. Let's take a look on the money line. They opened at 514 on the 24th.
Oh, perfect. Love
The
it.
Giants moved from plus 117 to minus 117.
Wow.
Yet they did. That's interesting because I can't imagine this has like a low total. Like probably a medium total would be my guess here. Huh. This is some fun stuff. 47. So that's a pretty significant like win probability shift. Yet the spread is largely, I mean, like it's moved with some juice, but like that's, I don't know, that's something very, very interesting. Again, if you're doing math, you'd be able to figure all these derivatives out. That's point in case. The thing that I use the most on this current odds tree is the derivative calculator. But all you'd have to do is collect a sample of these shifts, figure out what the implied the no vig line is, and then what the total is with no vig. And then you could easily set up a calculator if you were inclined in like Python, or I know I could do it in Google Sheets, but it would take a really long time. However, though, you might actually get strong at it. So now, like, this is the worst thing. I'm talking about it now. This would kill my wife. Now I want to do it now just so I can dump this service. But now I have to give up like 2.5 weeks of my life going through numbers. I don't know if it'll be good for the show entertainment wise, but as far as information wise, yeah, maybe I should do it off season. Anyways, we're going to take the Giants, and I'm going to hopefully try and memory hole what I just said.
Well, luckily it's recorded, so you'll have it forever.
Yeah, great.
All right, fat guy, on to the lightning round, everyone's favorite spot. Welcome back to the video if you've skipped forward to this spot. Detroit at Green Bay.
Lions.
Atlanta at Jacksonville.
Jags.
Denver at Chicago.
Broncos.
Baltimore at Cleveland.
The Browns.
Cincinnati at Tennessee.
Bengals.
Miami at Buffalo.
Buffalo Bills.
Washington at Philly.
The Commanders. I hate
Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay at New Orleans.
the Saints.
Minnesota at Carolina.
Minnesota.
Rams, Indy.
Colts.
Pittsburgh at Houston.
The Steelers.
Las Vegas at LAC.
The Raiders. Ugh.
Arizona at San Fran.
Arizona.
New England at Dallas.
New England Patriots.
Sunday Night Football, the Kansas City Chiefs at the New York Jets.
The Jets.
And we're so lucky, back-to-back New York games. Monday night, Seattle at the New York Giants.
We're going to take the Giants.
Interesting. It looks like we've taken quite a few favorites this week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 out of the 16 games, if my math is correct here, are favorites, fat guy. And congratulations to CSK going 12-4 against the spread for week 3. Very, very good. Very excellent week. Congratulations, CSK. We can take a look here. CSK on top. 1 game behind, limited by CZR and Asher as well. And then a bunch of other very recognizable names just slightly underneath them at 10 wins or 9 wins, respectively. Fat guy. Hodge Boomer Bus, 31, 16, and 1 to start the year, 66%. As well as shout out to Amir _SCH, as well above that 60% mark. And you can't forget Mickey and Jamison Griffith there. 1 more win. They're going to win the Thursday game for sure. That's just how these things work. And they're going to be above 60% for the year.
This is the JS715 Name of the Week. Whoa, kaboom!
Fat Guy JS715 Name of the Week is Fat Guy 2024 World Series of Poker bracelet winner. Is that
That's very funny you bring that up. I do have a little bit of poker acumen. I will say that. Some people have tried to convince me to go to the World Series. However, this is going to take a minute. However, though, I don't have any. I've played cash my whole life. I don't see the value in tournaments, but I have staked a lot of people that have not necessarily played in World Series events each time, but like I've staked people in World Series events. I've staked people in, big expensive tournaments, just because it's very, the variance on those is extremely high. There will be a day I go for a bracelet, but what'll end up happening is I'm going to study my brains off and play a really low field event of like 100 people, and it'll be a weird game that no one plays, like deuce to 7 triple draw or something like that. I don't even know if I'm saying the game right. So, anyways, it's possible. It won't be within the next 2 years, I would say. There's a chance I go for a bracelet in 3 years, just for the cachet, because you guys all know I care about what everyone thinks about me.
You heard it here first. Fat Guy 2026. So make your picks against the spread for week 4 at BigRyanTheFatGuy.com. Fat Guy, your thoughts on this week? Is there anything that's sticking out to you? Anything that you like? Maybe even behind the scenes. You don't even have to tell us what it is, but is there anything that excites you this week? Have you even looked it over yet?
Yeah, I've looked it over. I'm trying to find angles on. Tell you right now an angle. I'm going through stake.com and I'm trying to find where they're inefficient, not just on NFL, on anything, because I have access to an account that someone has gambled 7 figures in total on slot machines. So that's the weird. Here, I'm giving you a screenshot into. The account won't get limited because there's a guy on it who actively plays slot machines, which is a very high expected value for the website. So it's a whale account, as they call it. But however, though, I haven't found like something really good on stake yet because the juice is so high. But I haven't looked that hard either. So that's where I'm going to look. And I'm going to look through the NFL to try and make it more square. Because if they see you winning at NFL stuff, they usually don't correlate it with someone who knows what they're doing. So that's what I'm trying to do is best way to maximize a account that where it has slot play. That's what my next focus is.
Thank you guys for watching, and remember to make your picks against the spread for week 4 at BigRyanTheFatGuy.com. Like, subscribe if you made it this far. Good luck for your picks and your plays in week 4.